that is not there to cover for power, but to cover power.
Where did you work before?
Oh, I've been doing this independently since the beginning of my career. I started in radio, in community radio in New York. And then when we started doing Democracy Now!, we thought it would only be going for a couple of months leading into the elections. But there was such a demand because we don't just turn to the pundits that you see on all of the networks who know so little about so much, explaining the world to us and getting it so wrong. But turning to the experts in each community, those in their communities that are leading the way, and making that global, connecting the dots with people all over. The show airs throughout Latin America. Our headlines are translated into Spanish here in Argentina, as well as in Spain, as well as in Japan, in Sweden, in Austria, in South Africa. The idea of having independent television and radio, not brought to us by corporate interests, but by listeners and viewers who are deeply committed to getting information that is honest and real at the grassroots.
Is it possible to fight against, well, it's not against the big mass media, but I'm thinking about Fox News, for example. They have a very big influence, and many people in the States still think that Obama is a Muslim, that he was not born in the US. How can you fight this?
I mean, we're just about bringing out the facts, bringing out information. That is completely irresponsible when people lie on the air. But I think that right now, as we lead into the next elections, you know, President Obama has a very big task ahead of him because millions of people he galvanized, that's who voted for him in 2008. And he made a number of promises. Have we ended war? No. Has Guantanamo closed? Certainly an issue in Argentina that is very real, the issue of torture. No, Guantanamo has not closed.
But you could read about this at the New York Times or the Washington Post.
Oh, but the people we bring out on a daily basis, hearing the voices of people at the grassroots, it is rarely done. You have that same small circle of know-nothing pundits. And what you really don't have are, for example, when we're talking about the military, people in the military who are saying no to war, from the low-level soldiers to the generals. The movements, that is what's missing in the New York Times and the Washington Post on the big networks.
Grassroots movements.
Giving voice to movements, grassroots movements. That's below the corporate media radar screen. Yet those are the people who make history. In the United States, whether we're talking about those who fought for abolition of slavery, the women's rights movement, the modern-day civil rights movement, we need a media that gives voice to these movements because they're the ones that make history.
You're speaking about a media that is also in some way built by activists. So you're not only journalists, you're activists.
Well, I mean, I think what is absolutely critical is to give voice to what I think are the majority of people in the United States, and you don't get that in the rest of the media. For example, when you're talking about the economy, the number of people who have lost their homes, who are foreclosed on. Yet when you look at the networks, the people that you see are the bankers at the bailed out banks, not the people they foreclosed on. That reflects America. In the lead up to the invasion of Iraq, a media group did a study of the 4 major nightly newscasts in the United States. There were 393 interviews done around war in a 2-week period, a month before the invasion. 393. How many were against the war? 3 of almost 400. When half the people were against the war. Because I do think those who are opposed to war, those who are opposed to torture, are not a fringe minority, not even a silent majority. But the silenced majority, silenced by the corporate media, which is why we have to take it back.
Most of the people who take part of the silent majority, they supported Obama?
I think it's people across the political spectrum. I mean, people who are concerned about corporate control, about war, about issues of privacy, about the issue of health care. That cuts across the political spectrum. In the United States, so many tens of millions of people do not have any kind of health care coverage. And so I think it's important to not divide things into conservative or liberal, because people don't live their lives in that way. And it's important we have a media that reflects all of them.
How do you explain the development of the Tea Party movement?
You know, when the Tea Party movement began, it was people who were disenfranchised, who were angry, who were afraid. They lose their homes, they lose their jobs. And the media tends to give a voice, a microphone, to right-wing movements. Last anniversary of the invasion of Iraq in March 19th this past year, there were 2 protests in Washington. Tea Party movement, couple hundred people. There were about as many journalists covering them. The anti-war movement, thousands of people, hardly got any protest. So when you get a small core of people who are disempowered, who have no investment in the system, they're saying, how did this happen? And they're seeing their president, President Obama, supporting banks that foreclose on them, but not supporting them to keep them in their homes. They say we need something else. Maybe it's the government that is hurting us most. But then you overlay that with billionaires, with corporations that don't want any kind of government regulation, and they start pouring millions of dollars into these movements. Well, then the movement, without even wanting to be, becomes something entirely different, a kind of front group for very powerful interests that don't want to see the government regulate them.
When we think about Barack Obama, can we say that he can do something different? He doesn't want to do something different?
You know, I see Election Day 2008 as a big change. People felt they had hit their heads against a brick wall for so long. That wall then became a door. The door opened a crack. And the question is, will it be kicked open or slammed shut? And that's not up to him. It's up to all the people that voted for him, that are pushing, the movements that are pushing for something different. What Obama can do, he has surprised many by surrounding himself by the typical insiders that are there for the Republicans and for the Democrats before him. And so he is insulated, and he tends to continue the same policies. The question is, will those on the outside who actually elected him, the millions of people who got activated, galvanized, will they make demands the way he responds to the right because they make demands? Will they make loud demands? Just because they elected him doesn't mean they have to be satisfied with his policies today.
Do you see other independent media beginning to move in the States?
We are trying to build an independent media movement. It's absolutely essential, and it cuts across the political spectrum. People are deeply concerned that the internet remain open and free, that network neutrality be preserved so that the telecom companies, the cable companies don't get to write the legislation in Washington that would privatize the internet now that it's so profitable. And we have to ensure that media monopoly does not subvert democracy. When you have one TV, radio network that owns the radio, the TV, and the newspapers in a town, that's a threat to a democratic society. And people across the political spectrum feel that way. And there's a big media democracy movement in the United States to ensure that we don't, that those few media moguls, the media monopolists in the United States, do not take over all of the spaces, radio, television, internet. That is what threatens the free speech of everyone else.
Okay, thank you very much for being with us today. It was really very important to know a different voice from the U.S., fall apart from what we always see on the big mass media, New York Times, Washington Post, or Fox News, CBS, CNN. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seguimos en Visión 7 Internacional ahora con datos respecto del personaje de hoy, 0800 444 1777 y 45350709. A corta edad, nuestro personaje, la fotografía que ustedes están viendo allí, sufre una grave enfermedad en los ojos que lo mantiene prácticamente ciego durante 18 meses. Con admirable fuerza de voluntad, aprende a leer y a tocar el piano con el sistema braille. Recupera la vista, pero con una visión limitada. Abandona la idea de estudiar matemática y se inclina por la literatura inglesa. A los 22 años escribe su primer libro de poesía. ¿Quién es este hombre? 0800 444 1777 45350709. Nueva pausa en Visión 7 Internacional con este tema. Fronteras en conflicto. El dragado del río San Juan despertó un antiguo diferendo limítrofe entre Costa Rica y Nicaragua, convirtiéndose en escenario de disputa entre proyectos políticos contrapuestos. Los detalles, luego de la pausa, en Visión 7 Internacional.
Para el Banco Provincia, un microemprendimiento es grande, porque es grande para aquel que sueña con hacerlo realidad, porque es grande el orgullo que genera, porque es grande el futuro que construye.
Y esa es mi misión, esa es mi obligación, esa es mi responsabilidad. Trabajar para poder cumplir los objetivos de cada uno de ustedes. El crédito tiene que ser solidario.
Ya son 10.000 los microcréditos entregados. Ya son 10.000 los sueños que hicimos realidad. Buenos Aires, la provincia, es grande. Banco Provincia. Un banco que hace una provincia que crece.
La primavera es el momento ideal para renovarse y Garbarino te ofrece todo para que la disfrutes.
Pava eléctrica Philips con tarjeta Santander Río en 18 cuotas sin interés de 14 pesos con 94. Garbarino, venía a disfrutar.
El 20 de noviembre de 1845, en un recodo del río Paraná, conocido como la Vuelta de Obligado, el pueblo argentino dejó en claro a los agresores ingleses y franceses que aún, con diferencias políticas internas, estaba dispuesto a resistir, a defender con su vida la soberanía nacional.
Disfruta más de tus momentos. En tus sábanas y en todas tus telas, sentí la frescura de Poet Fraganza. Poet, inspírate.
Con personal Backtones, activa colgando en tus manos por solo 2 pesos con 99. Envía sin cargo la palabra Quiero Uno al 833 para que cuando te llamen tus amigos escuchen este tema de Carlos Baute.
Hola.
En un mundo donde todos disfrutaban, alguien vino a poner límites al placer. Llegó el momento de llamar a la mejor nafta de YPF por lo que es. Premium, la mejor nafta de YPF.
Dale nuevas experiencias a tu ropa. Quítale las manchas con Renet y chau manchas.